Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the Shining Scholar Education Podcast, where we talk about secondary English and language arts tips, strategies, and resources. We'll also share the ups and downs in the wonderful world of teaching. I'm your host, Charlie, and I'm a teacher creator here with Shining Scholar Education. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello again, my friends, and thank you for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest, Mr. Dave Meyers from Teachersconnect, which I came across on Instagram. And I just fell in love with everything they were doing for the teaching community. They're really out there helping teachers and letting us know that we're not alone and fostering a sense of community and support to help us be the best teacher we can be. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Mr. Meyers.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dave Meyers. I am the CEO and co-founder of Teachersconnect, and I'm a former classroom teacher, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Charlie, you and your team, I think, are doing amazing work in highlighting the work of classroom teachers, highlighting your own work, and making sure that teachers get a great chance to learn from each other. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much, Dave. That means a lot. And yeah, so I feel like we're each kind of doing our own little part and serving the community as a whole. And, you know, it's just a beautiful thing when different people with different talents and abilities come together to make it better as a whole, you know, that whole concept of synergy. Absolutely. Great. Well, can you start off by giving us a little background about yourself?
Sure. Well, I perhaps was one of those really, I don't know, either lucky or geeky people. When I graduated high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was to be a teacher. But I figured I'd want to teach at higher ed because I thought that's where the intellectual challenge would be. And fortunately, nothing wrong with higher ed, but fortunately, while I was in school, in college, I took a semester off and I got a job as a paraprofessional in a grades 3 and 4 classroom for kids with severe behavioral and emotional issues here in Boston. And it took no time for me to understand there were few things more intellectually challenging than trying to prevent these 12 little 8 and 9-year-old boys, and they were all boys in this class, trying to prevent them from really beating the stuffing out of each other every day. Because that was, that's what they, I don't know, that's what they, at least initially, that's what they wanted to do. And so I rearranged things after that great experience. I loved it. I rearranged things in my academic schedule, went back up to school, and became an elementary school teacher. Did that for 6 years, taught middle school for 5. I got my license to become a principal, and I was a union leader. During that time, I was the chair of the negotiating team for our teachers union for either 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And all of that was an amazing, each of those experiences were really powerful and amazing. So that's kind of the start. That's my professional background. Mm-hmm. And then, so during that time, I think one of the funny, at 23, all 23 years old of me, I thought I was going to be a great teacher right away, of course, like every new teacher should, right?
Right.
The reason we go into this is because we're certain we're going to be the one to get the kids to love the scientific method or to love a piece of literature, whatever it is. We are certain that we're going to be great at it right away. And I was pretty certain at 23 that I was going to be a great teacher of literature and of writing right away. And in my first year teaching, I was teaching 5th grade. It took me really, all of 17 minutes into my career to understand the fact that I was reasonably competent and reasonably confident as a writer myself meant absolutely nothing in terms of reaching the varied writers in my first classroom. And I realized I had a lot of learning to do. It was probably the smartest self-observation or piece of self-reflection I've made in my professional career to understand I just really had no idea what I was doing when it came to teaching writing.
Wow,
So
that's some deep insight.
yeah, it was kind of painful insight actually. Um, because, like I said, we all go into this with self-perceptions that we're going to be the one to make the difference in students' lives.
Hmm.
And I realized very early on that I wasn't going to be making very many differences in students' lives, particularly around the way that we were working on writing. So I got very interested in getting better, and fortunately, early on, met with a couple other early career teachers who were great doers. I was at that point kind of a ruminator.
Hmm.
Um, I was fortunate enough to hook up with a couple other teachers, a husband and wife actually, who were also early in their careers. This is in the mid '90s, and they had started this summer writing program. It was called the Writers Express, and they asked, did I want to join them? And it was an incredibly, it was a first of all, just so fun. We did things like we were working with middle schoolers in Boston.
Hmm.
We did things like salsa dancing, um, gospel singing, rock climbing. We toured a fortune cookie factory in Chinatown here in Boston. And we
Hmm.
did all of those things to basically take away, if you teach, if you or any of your listeners have ever taught writing to students, one of the biggest chorus cries you hear is, I've got nothing to write about,
Amen.
right?
Yes, yes.
And so we were able to say, you're 13 years old, you just stood up on a stage and did a gospel singing solo. Or you're 13 years old, I just saw you dangling back and forth on a rock face. I think you've got something to write about.
Right, right.
And so that was how that camp was my summer job for 7 years. And really, what we did each summer is we would take some learning from the summer, bring it back to our classrooms, apply it in the classroom, tweak it again for the summer, and we went through that cycle for a whole bunch of years. And then it got to the point where the kids started going back to their schools, the kids at the summer camp, and ranting and raving about this really fun, really exciting writing camp. and and I think the adults looked at them, I can imagine they kind of like cocked their heads and went, really? Um, because we really had a range of kids. There were some kids who were there because they were better writers than I could ever hope to be. Already at 12 years old, they were incredible. And then there were some kids who were there because, it was under threat. You either do this or you go to summer school. So we had really quite a range of kids. And not all of them were very positive about writing, but what they were describing to their teachers was, we didn't know it then, but now that have more of an understanding of learning science, it was very powerful. What they were describing was many teachers, and you've probably had this experience, Charlie, like a cocktail party or something where people say, "Oh, I'm not a writer," or "I'm
Yes,
not a math person," right?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So for some people it's like it's a writing is a toggle switch. Either you are or you are not.
Right.
And right. And what these kids were expressing to their teachers was something quite different. They were saying, yeah, writing is really hard, but I got some good practice this summer, and I feel like with a little bit of work, I can get a little bit better.
Wow.
And yeah, right. It was this the possibility of incremental progress.
Hmm.
And as you know, that's a difference maker in the way, particularly a struggling student or a struggling learner. It doesn't have to be a formal teacher-student relationship. If a learner has this sense, this the possibility for incremental progress, they're much more likely to make effort, to fail, to try again. So it was very powerful.
That's amazing. So it's like some of these, like you said, not necessarily students, but learners in general, shifted from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset in the sense that, that they kind of think, okay, I'm not that great now, but I'm getting better and I can get better. That's a that's a huge difference maker, like you were saying.
Exactly, and they were finding some joy in it. We were helping teachers and helping kids find some joy in it, even if it was one really powerful verb, one hilarious piece of description, even if the rest of the piece wasn't so hot. Just helping kids just find a little joy in it, and helping teachers also find ways to bring out that joy. So yeah, it
Mm,
was it was a big deal, and yeah, I think you're right. This was before, um, or at least before the notion of fixed mindset, um, and Carol Dweck. That I hadn't been introduced to that yet,
mhm.
but you're right. That is what was happening.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So even before the concept, was formally labeled or books were out or anything, these kids were experiencing it, and I can only imagine how that ripple effect carried on to the rest of not only their academic lives but their personal lives.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. A lot of the kids that came to the camp, one they would often describe that the summer camp, and I'm sure there are all kinds of reasons for this. It was summer. We weren't grading them. There were no high stakes tests or anything like that. But they did often describe, this is the place where I feel like I fit in. I don't have to be, strong or tall or good at sports or whatever
Mhm.
other ways people fit in. But
Mhm.
they felt like they felt comfortable in this community of writers and adventurers. And it's pretty powerful.
Wow, wow, that's great, and that's a fantastic environment for learning to take place. Where they feel comfortable to make mistakes and in quotations fail, but
Yeah,
fail forward and keep growing. That's amazing.
that's right. And so interestingly, that same mentality applied to the adults in this program, because especially in the beginning, we were really making it up as we went, and we were doing all kinds of wild experiments because it was summer, and this was before No Child Left Behind, and here in the Boston area, there weren't any high stakes tests really at that
Mm,
point, so we were free to experiment, and we did, and sometimes our experiments failed miserably, and sometimes we hit on something really wild, and we were experimenting with all kinds of things like, how many times a day can kids write, and for how long at one time before the quality of the writing drops off, and how frequently should they get feedback, and how much feedback, and what kind of feedback. We were experimenting with all those kinds of questions, and
mhm.
um, it was an amazing learning experience for the adults. And one summer, we decided to formalize it as a learning experience for adults, and we were able to convince one of the local. We ran the camp at local universities, and on the campuses of local universities. And one summer, we were able to convince one of those universities, Simmons College, the School of Education there,
Mhm.
to allow us to do a graduate education course and use the camp as the as the class, basically. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so we hired teachers. It was a job for them. They got paid, and they got, I don't remember, 3 or 4 graduate credits for a course that was called. It was not a title that rolls off your tongue. I think it was differentiated writing instruction to close the achievement gap, something like
Oh,
that.
yeah, it's a
So
mouthful.
yes, but that was. so we started using the camp as a really a professional development site for teachers. And in doing that, that forced us to create a curriculum. And then we started getting calls from school districts saying, do you do professional development? Do you have a curriculum? And we said, sure, we can do that. And started doing it. And again, this was, I was still teaching at this point. But summers, weekends, evenings, doing some of this professional development, curriculum development, writing work. And it got to a point, I was 11 years into my teaching career. I was loving teaching still, but I was ready for a new challenge. I was about to start applying for principalships. My daughter was born. There were a whole bunch of, kind of changes happening. And we suddenly got requests for, can you provide curriculum and do professional development, a series of professional development workshops and coaching sessions for, 200 teachers in Springfield, Massachusetts, or I think it was 60 or 70 teachers in San Francisco Unified. And suddenly there was an opportunity here that was more than what we could manage as a side gig. And in 2003, I took what I thought was going to be a 1-year leave of absence before starting, before applying for principalships. And that 1-year leave of absence continues today.
Wow. Now, I'm sure you had mixed feelings about leaving the classroom, but also being excited about this new project and adventure.
Yeah, I didn't really have mixed feelings because I didn't think I was leaving the classroom.
Okay.
I really did expect it was an adventure. It felt like an adventure. It was, help the Writers Express, this nonprofit, help create a formalized curriculum and professional development model, help it go national. And that part, yes, was an exciting adventure, but I really did expect that I was going to be back the following year. I never expected to, to sort of start a whole new career path at that point, but that is what happened.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about that moment, that decisive moment when you realized I can't go back to the classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. I think it was, I don't know that there was a moment. I think it was just, I really was enjoying what we were doing. I loved working. I was incredibly lucky to be working with the people I was working with at the Writers Express. They were all incredible teachers. They taught me a lot about entrepreneurialism and risk taking. We had amazing discussions, sometimes, kind of goofy arguments about how to approach a concept in writing or in literature. It just was really incredibly fun, exciting, stimulating, challenging. And so I don't know that there was a moment, Charlie, when I was like, you know what, I'm not going to go back. I think it was more like, I guess there probably was an operational moment where I had to tell my district, I'm not coming back after my leave of absence. But I don't remember it being, it felt fairly, it definitely felt like the right thing to do, because I still at that point was like, I assume I'm going back, but I want to do this for another year. I'm really enjoying this. I'm getting, one of the most powerful parts of it was that I got to go into other classrooms all over the country. I had spent 11 years in my classroom and I learned a lot, but being in other classrooms in all kinds of districts was just an amazingly exciting learning experience. And so I don't know, there was, I'm sure, some reflection, but I think I was just so caught up in the excitement with what I was doing that I didn't mourn it or anything like that.
Well, and in a way, you were now teaching and on a huge scale, on a global stage, I want to say, because your reach, from what I can tell, is, multinational.
Well, yeah. So that all everything I've talked about is really a prelude to it is connected because it's all part of the past, but
Hmm.
it's really a prelude to where I am now with Teachers Connect. And I don't know. Would it be helpful to explain the connection between that early part of my career to where I am today?
Yes, please.
Okay, so with the Writers Express, we were a small nonprofit. We were constantly struggling for funding. We were all teachers, uh, entrepreneurial and risk taking, but at least at the beginning, didn't have a whole lot of business experience, and I think frankly, we were so excited by the learning
Hmm.
uh, that we didn't have the business sense at that point to understand what excited us didn't necessarily excite other people. And what we found, so thrilling about a piece of literature or a way to approach writing didn't necessarily excite other people. We had to figure out better ways of of communicating it. Um, and so we were always struggling. And it got to the point, let's see, my colleague then, Deb, she was running the organization and doing the fundraising work, and I think she ran into or in her networking, she said, you should talk to so and so. He'll love what you're doing. And she talked to his name is Larry Berger. She talked to him
Hmm.
and he said, you know what, I love what you're doing, and I could make a donation, but actually we're looking for something for the kind of organization that you guys have built. Um, we love your approach to writing. You didn't start with and I think he said something like, your approach to developing a writing curriculum and professional development to go along with it is similar to the way that good software developers develop software, which is to say, you didn't start with an answer or an approach. You started by identifying a problem,
Hmm.
and you did all kinds of experiments and all kinds of iterations trying to solve that very specific problem and sharpening the definition of the problem each time you did it. And
Hmm.
he sort of said, we love that. And we're trying to get into content, and we want to start with ELA. And I don't want a donation. We want you to join us. And so,
Wow.
yeah, no, it was a great opportunity. And in 2009, we ended up the nonprofit, the Writers Express, ended up being acquired by a company that at that point was called Wireless Generation. They were based in New York, in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
So that was a great opportunity. And then about 13 months later, in 2010, Wireless Generation was acquired by News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch. Um, and Rupert Murdoch came in and said, take everything you know about the visualization of data, which was one of the things that Wireless Generation was great at. Take everything you know about technology, which again was, and the use of technology in education, which was another strength of theirs. Um,
Hmm.
take everything you know about the Common Core standards, which we had been working on, and we're in the early stages at that point. Take everything you know about how to motivate teachers through professional development and through practice in the instruction of writing, and reimagine teaching and learning. And you've got a 4-year runway, and don't worry if the market's not ready for what you imagine. So this was,
Wow.
yes, it was an incredible opportunity to it was my own personal introduction to visual designers, user experience researchers, um, coders, um, academic researchers. It really just was an amazing opportunity, and it was the Wild West. The specific project that we were working on started with 9 or 10 people in a corporate apartment in Brooklyn, and within about 18 months, between employees and contractors, there were, I think, at one point about 500 people working on it. It was,
Wow.
yeah, really remarkable growth and really amazing learning for me personally.
Wow.
Um, Go ahead. Did you want to
I
ask
was
something? Or?
yeah, I was, just gonna say that's incredible. In 18 months, that much happened, and I mean, was it almost like, too good to be true? Did you have to pinch yourself to see the dream was coming true and just growing and
Well, yeah. I mean, like often, I don't think I had too many moments to reflect on how lucky I was. There were times
Mhm.
because I was commuting back and forth on the train between Boston and New York for a couple of years. So there were some times on the train where I guess I had those pinch yourself moments. But I knew it was unique. And again, the people I was working with were just so interesting and talented and um, just bent on making a difference in young writers and readers' lives, and that part was just, yeah, that was the kind of pinch yourself material. But now we had resources. We had the resources of a Rupert Murdoch company, and
Mhm.
there are perils with that, which I now know in retrospect. But there were also incredible opportunities. So yeah, it was really a great opportunity.
That sounds amazing, and having the title of CEO is something that I think a lot of people really admire, and unfortunately for a lot of them, they see too many obstacles or they think it's out of reach. And now that you've told us a little bit about your journey to becoming CEO, can you think of any advice you'd have for other educators with similar aspirations and goals?
Sure, and also just to be clear, I was not I I was not CEO of that company that I've described. That was that confusing? Maybe I should clarify this.
Yes, please. I'm sorry, I might have made that assumption. Yes, please do.
Okay. Yeah, no. So that company, I was not, that is not the company that I founded. I was not CEO of that company. I was involved in some amazing product development experiments, digitizing ELA curriculum pretty early on in a really unique way. And no, I was there for about 4 years. And what happened was, um, I was in classrooms all over the country piloting this new technology. And what it was ELA curriculum, really powerful ELA curriculum delivered to students and teachers via tablet. And my work, I was in front of all of our pilots. Even if the software didn't work so well and the hardware didn't work so well, the curriculum wasn't totally finalized. One of the big pieces of advice I would give to teachers who are thinking about making some sort of leap into an area outside of the classroom, like you, Charlie, have done with your colleagues. One of the most important pieces of advice is what you're never gonna you'll never achieve your vision. What you do, what your product is, or what your service is never going to be that perfect version of your vision. Even if
Hmm.
it's 40% done, 60% done, whatever it is, get it out there and start getting feedback on it, because it's gonna you're gonna learn so much, and you're gonna have to adjust your vision by getting it out there and by getting students and kids to use it. And that's exactly what we were doing. And what I saw in my work in front of all of our pilots, what I saw over and over again in every kind of classroom that you can imagine was, it didn't matter how um, exquisite the curriculum was, sorry, it didn't matter how exquisite the literature was that we chose for the curriculum, and we did choose, amazing pieces of literature. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter how beautiful and intuitive the interface was on the device, and they were beautiful, if not always intuitive. Um, and it didn't matter how many times we tested the analog version of the lesson plans in classrooms all over the country. The difference maker in how these lessons went was, guess what? The skill and the outlook of the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I started seeing a couple patterns. One was, we might be pressing on the wrong, choose your metaphor, the wrong lever, the wrong button. Curriculum matters, of course. It's important. You don't have teachers having to create their own curriculum all the time. But the difference maker is the teacher. And so that was one pattern that I saw over and over. And another pattern was, I started working with teachers. I was getting older, and the teachers that I was working with, the 20-something-year-old teachers at that point, were much more willing and likely. First of all, um, they were much more likely to seek out answers to their questions on social media, on the internet, in places like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were also much more willing, for whatever reason, and I have my theories as to why, but they were much more willing to raise their hand and say, I'm really struggling with this. I need help. There was, when I was, at least in the school that I was when I began my career, there was this sense of, you got to be stoic. You're in your classroom. You got to deal with whatever comes. No one expected me to be great at it right away, but
Mm-hmm.
the expectation is, you deal with it. You figure it out. And it seemed like with these younger teachers that I had been working with, there actually was a sense of, actually, no, I need a community to help me work out this problem, even though I feel like I'm the only one dealing with it. So those observations made me realize, I do like what I'm doing, but I would really like to focus on the teacher side of this. And I ended up leaving that company. It's now called Amplify. And I decided, I'm either going to find some people who are really interested in this problem of teacher isolation and teachers seeking community, or if I can't find the right kind of people or organization, I'll found one. And I ended up founding Teachersconnect.
Wow, wow. Okay. So I think you just have a keen eye for seeing the problems that are there and then being creative in brainstorming different solutions. And then that whole concept as a teacher of, monitor and adjust and monitor and adjust. And just like, you can write the perfect lesson plan, but once it's executed, you see, oh, I need to change this or this, and go with the flow and see where it leads you. And sometimes, that's some of the best discoveries.
That's exactly right. And I mean, you said it really well, Charlie, that most teachers do that constantly, that
Hmm.
monitor and adjust, check and adjust, monitor and adjust. That is always what happens. And you realize there's I don't know, a group of kids who hasn't understood the way you explain a particular concept. And so you adjust, you reiterate, and yes, it's another version of that I've learned while teaching, I think.
And I think that piece of advice you gave for teachers, with similar aspirations to becoming CEO or any other, entrepreneurial project they may have, of, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't necessarily have to look like you had it pictured in your head, but you do have to, start something or do something. And that goes back to a quote that I've repeated several times on the podcast, but I feel like it really, it holds so much truth. It says, I forgot who said it, but it's like, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's something that you've really lived through your businesses and different projects that you've worked on. That seems to be like a operating principle for you. Is that right?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have said it so eloquently, but yes, absolutely. whether it was in my teaching or in the nonprofit or now in this, with Teachersconnect, it's absolutely true. I mean, in fact, I have come to expect that even though I'm prepared, I've worked hard, I've talked with a lot of people, the early versions of whatever it is are going to have all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. And can you think of another piece of advice if you had to boil it down to two things? Can you think of a second thing for teachers out there with aspirations like yours?
Yeah, I guess the second piece of advice is talk to a lot of both talk to teachers, and if you haven't had business experience like I had not at that point, it's really important. And in fact, even if you have had business experience, I think it's really important to find people who can share their experience and advice around business. And by the way, I don't just mean because sometimes teachers will hear me say this and they'll think, oh, well, I'm really good with a spreadsheet or I'm really good with numbers. Or they'll say the opposite. I'm terrible with spreadsheets or terrible with numbers. And that's really not what I mean by business experience. That's that's of course, if you are good with a spreadsheet, great. But in the very beginning of your business, most likely you're not going to be worrying too much about spreadsheets and doing budgets and numbers and things like that. What you
Right.
need to worry about is getting feedback on whatever your product or service is. So yeah, I think um, finding some people who can give you good feedback and advice on how to get your whatever your thing is, your product or your service or your idea out there so you can begin capturing feedback on it.
That's great, and I think that ties back to one of the principles I think that I've learned from my mentor teacher way back when I first started teaching that I'd never forgotten, and he said something to the effect of, the greatest teachers are always great students. Don't ever think
Yeah.
just because you have that title of teacher that you know everything, because that's the quickest way to not improve. And
Yep.
that really has stuck to me. It's like, and I'll tell my kids, when I don't know something, I don't know something, or I'm studying something else, and I think a lot of students have this perception of teachers like, oh, you're a finished product. You've learned everything you were going to learn. Now, fill me like a vessel with all your knowledge. And it's like, no, we're both growing and learning all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
so, unless you had something else to add to that, Dave, I was going to ask about how has Teachers Connect been affected by COVID-19?
Yeah. So let me start by just giving you a quick rundown on what we were aiming to do at Teachers Connect from the get go.
Sure.
Really, our goal was to make sure that teaching is never again a solo activity. I just, we saw over and over again people, young teachers, when they would hit an instructional challenge and they would go out to YouTube or to Instagram or Twitter.
Hmm.
And a lot of teachers just, we did an early study early in Teachers Connect and basically asking teachers, you know, um, what are your experiences, particularly early career teachers? What are your experiences? And one of the patterns that came through was this sense of, and this really came through with novices and veterans. This sense of I feel alone, and people were actually using. There's a lot of dating language that people were using. We spoke to one woman she was in rural West Texas. So
Hmm.
you know better than I do what that area looks like. It's the way she described it. She was, it was in a very small district in a very rural area.
Hmm.
And she was a teacher. She said she was a fourth grade teacher, and she said she had like, I don't know, 27 students. And she said, I've got 19 boys. And she was like, their testosterone is just running rampant. And I know I've got to do something different this year. And she saw on YouTube something about Legos and robotics. And she said, this looks great. And she wanted to try it. And she looked around her school building and she said, I don't have a peer here. There's no one like me that's willing to experiment like this, that wants to experiment. And then she started using language like, but it's a big sea out there. there's got to be a soulmate for me. Like literally using that kind of dating language. And of course, she was right. There are other people, fourth grade teachers like her, who are interested in figuring out how to use Legos and robotics to get their kids, regardless of whether they're boys or girls or whatever the ratio is.
Mhm.
She just wanted to experiment. And we just heard that kind of pattern over and over again. And that's why we started Teachersconnect. And in a way, we think of it as kind of like a dating site for teachers, except we don't match them based on their romantic interests. We match them based on the instructional challenges they're having.
That's great. That's
So
great.
yeah, no, it was an amazing piece of research. It was just great to be able to speak with all those teachers and really uncover these patterns of like, we created some design principles out of this research. Like one was people wanting to see their ripples. As you throw a pebble into a still pond and you see the ripples. Well,
Mhm.
people wanted to know, they wanted to feel like I'm having an impact on other, not just kids, but other teachers. And we had novice teachers saying, thank you to my veteran colleagues who keep feeding me curriculum. Really appreciate it. But don't forget that I've got something to offer as well. And, they wanted to be able to see their impact and they wanted to be able to ask questions without feeling judged. And so
Mhm.
these were all of the principles that drove our work. Um, so if you want, I can transition to COVID and how COVID has really impacted what we do, unless you have other questions.
No, no, that's great. Yes, because I can imagine, a lot of your meetings or work that the teachers did with each other, a lot of it was face to face, I imagine.
Yeah, so Teachers Connect, the Teachers Connect network is the face to face work is incredibly important, but
Mhm.
the network itself is online. It's a website. It's a web community, an internet community, and as you said, it's international. In any given month, about 20% of the activity comes from outside of the U.S. Um, so what happened with COVID, when COVID hit, you know, mid-March, I don't know what it was. What was it was it mid-March in your area when schools shut down?
Yes, it was right in the middle of spring break, and so we were on spring break, and we all got messages saying, "Don't come back,
Don't
it's
come
gonna be a
back.
while." Yeah.
Okay. Right. So yeah, it was March 13th up here. But anyway, mid-March, suddenly schools shut down and there's not an expert in the world, right?
Mhm.
Yes, there are teachers who have been teaching in fully remote schools, and there are students who've been students in fully remote schools. But every one of those teachers raised their hands and said, I'd like to do this. And every one of those students and families raised their hands and said, I'd like to do this. And presumably they got the hardware and the software and some instruction on how to do it. Well, that was a very different situation, right? All of a sudden you had millions, tens of millions of students and millions of teachers who were in this situation without a choice, and there wasn't an expert there. And some teachers with very legitimate personal and professional reasons, sort of froze or weren't sure what to do. And then there was a group of teachers that said, yes, this is my opportunity to try and I can ditch the district standards. I can try out some of the technology I've been wanting to try out. I can try out some of the approaches I've been wanting to try out. There was a group of teachers that was relishing this moment. Uh,
Mm.
as a teacher, obviously, not everything else that came with it.
Right, right, right.
Um, and we started hearing this in the Teachers Connect community, and we thought, we've got to get the work. There were people doing really amazing things right away as you know, Charlie, just there were teachers all around the country and really all around the world just being incredibly resourceful, creative, and we wanted to make sure their voices got out there because A, we wanted to give them the recognition they deserved, and B, there were a lot of other teachers who were looking for those techniques. And we did the first one at the very end of March. I remember my wife's birthday was the first one, March 29th.
Mm-hmm.
We did a series of what we called open mic nights. The series was called Coronavirus RX for Ed, and they were open mic nights. If you're familiar, are you familiar with the open mic concept at a comedy club or a music club?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this was the same thing. These were classroom teachers. They were not professional consultants or professional development deliverers. These were all classroom teachers. That was a requirement. We gave them 3 questions. Question number 1 was, what is the instructional problem or the instructional challenge you're seeing? Question 2 was, what have you done to address it? And question 3 is, what are you seeing so far? Well, what are your observations so far? And we gave them that little framework. They filled in an application. They answered those 3 questions. And then we gave them 5 minutes to step up to the virtual open mic, present their answers to those 3 questions, and then they had 2 or 3 minutes for Q&A. And we did usually 3 or 4 of those in an hour. And they were amazing. Or I guess more precisely, no, just about all of them were amazing. I mean, it's open mic, right?
Right.
These people were teaching during the day and didn't have a lot of time to prepare and rehearse and things like that. But what happened was our participants started writing to us and saying, that teacher you had on who talked about how to get kids doing collaborative work even though they're not in the same place, could you have her come back on and explain exactly how I can do that same work in my classroom? Like, have her give us the instructions.
Oh, that's
So
awesome. So like an encore performance almost.
exactly, yes, exactly. And what was happening is that those participants, in that same put it out there and adjust, put it out there and adjust, it was that they were giving us feedback that never would have occurred to us. This goes back to that point I was making of get it out there. They were giving us feedback on what they really wanted and needed, and what was going to make these webinars better for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what they said was, we need a 4th step, add a 4th question, and that is, how can you, or the answer to it is, these are the steps that you can take in your classroom to apply it in your teaching situation. So we went back to a few teachers, and they were totally excited. We said, a couple of people have asked, do you want to do this? And they said, absolutely. Came back on. We had a couple of people come back on. And then again, people said, that was great. And I'm glad you recorded it, but could you make it kind of like a recipe that we could just follow and give us a few ways that we can modify if we teach older kids or younger kids or kids with a lot of ELL students or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so we went back to these brilliant teachers and said, how about if you create like a 10-minute video? Just, use a screencast, use, samples of student work, use what you've learned so far, just create an instructional video. And they did. And we put those videos out to some of the teachers in our community, and they said, these are great. And we said, you know what, there's something here. There are all these teachers out there with amazing ideas and amazing approaches to really important instructional problems. All of them could use some additional income because they're teachers. Mm-hmm. We have an audience that we think is interested in this. We have a way to reach that audience. How about if we set up a way for teachers to create these instructional videos, We sell them. We use our platform, our community to sell those instructional videos. We know their high needs. We know they're short. None of them is more than 20 minutes, or between 10 and 20 minutes. We know they're on a really important and pivotal instructional challenge. How about if we give the teachers a chance to sell those videos and give them half of the revenue that is generated from our sales? So that is, we call it grab and grow, and it's called that. Hopefully, it's obvious, but just in case it isn't, the idea is you take what the teacher has presented in this instructional video, and if it's a Wednesday, on Thursday you can start using it, and it's going to begin to make you a better teacher around that particular instructional problem right away. Maybe you and your kids are going to need some time, to practice and get better, but it's not the kind of thing that takes a summer to plan or even a week to plan. The idea is learn it today, start implementing it tomorrow.
Wow, that's great. And the portability and accessibility to these videos is, I think, a key concept that, is just tremendously beneficial to teachers because, if they're working and then going to school after class, or they have kids or whatever, and they can maybe get 30 minutes in, the night before, there's their professional development, and they can implement it, like you said, the next day and, learn from it, grow from it. So that grab and grow title fits perfectly, I think.
Yeah, that's and that is exactly the notion, Charlie. You said it beautifully. That is exactly the notion. And the only thing I would add to it is one of the things that was really clear as we did the research and asked people for feedback when we put out the initial videos. Mm-hmm. They said everything that you just said, and one other very important thing, which was these have to be classroom teachers. No, I've got nothing against consultants, they said, but I want people who've worked on this since COVID. I want people who can tell me this is what you should expect to see when you're doing this online, or these are the technology challenges that you might face with this piece of software that I've just described. They said, yes, consultants are great, but I want practicing teachers who are learning as they go, just like I am. And so that's another, really important piece of this. We have had, it's been hard. We've had a couple of consultants who seem great, who have, I think, presentations that would be very powerful and relevant to teachers. And we've had to say, you seem great, and what you're proposing is important and relevant, but we are what we're promising to our audience, to our community right now, is that these are practicing teachers who are sharing these approaches.
Right, and I think that says, a lot about authenticity to your audience. Just like you said, there's nothing like hearing from someone who's in the trenches with you. To use a metaphor, there's nothing as powerful to see that someone, who's fighting the same battle you are, give some helpful information and strategies and things like that, because I feel like that really, adds tons of credibility. And not only that, but you feel that sense of community, like, oh, I'm not alone. And they're facing the same struggles or different ones. And, it's just a beautiful thing to say, hey, watch out up ahead. This is what might be there, or this is what I've experienced. And here's, the benefit of my experience. That's just a win-win situation.
That's right. That is the idea. And the other important win-win aspect to this, I think, is, or related to the concept of go for it. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be polished. The notion that any teacher, or many teachers could create an instructional video on something that they're working on where they've seen some progress. You don't have to have a master's in, X, Y, or Z in order to qualify to make a video. You don't have to have been State Teacher of the Year or be NBCT certified to be a creator of a video. You have to have thought carefully about an instructional problem, figured out an approach that that left you with optimism and hope, and you felt like was powerful in terms of your own learning and the students' learning, and then figure out a way to present it. And you don't need to look great on camera, and you don't need to be a professional video producer or anything like that. That's hopefully the other win-win, that it really empowers every classroom teacher.
Right, right. And for those teachers that might be a little camera shy, can they make a video just with the screencast and just show their screen and a voiceover perhaps, or would you prefer a face-to-face video?
That's a really interesting question. And remember, this is new. We're about 2 weeks into this right now, and
Oh, okay.
so I'm going to tell you where we are today on that. But I'm also going to tell you we could very well see that we'll adjust this. What we're seeing today is that people really like to see not only hear the voice of the other teacher, but to see their face, at least for part of the course.
Hmm.
It's important to, this is all asynchronous. People are doing this on their own time. It's a recorded video. It's not live, but being able to see someone's face and maybe even see them in their classroom, or in some of the videos you can see the teacher. We've got video of a teacher working with students or a student. That part, I think, makes it better. It's not a requirement right now that they show their face, but
Hmm.
in general, we think that's going to make the course instructor more relatable to the participant.
Right, right. No, and then personal experience, we've seen, or at least I've seen, studying stats on YouTube and different, media channels. They say, videos with a face or at least someone introducing something and then going to their screen has way more videos, clicks, and then they watch for a longer period of time. So there is that human element to, the face-to-face connection, so they can see it's a person behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, that's the kind of thing. It's been really interesting working with our we call them trailblazers, our early course creators.
Hmm.
There are some of them. There's a woman named Melissa Clark, who is she's been a YouTuber and a really good teacher YouTuber for years. She she's got the lighting down, the background down. Her voice is incredible. She looks amazing as she produces her videos. And then there are other people who have done this, who said, I have never done anything like this before. I'm nervous. I might even have to, one woman went out. You don't have to do this, but she went out and bought a better mic. Um, and one of the things she loved about the process was learning how to create video and how to make sure a light is shining on her face, not from behind her. And she learned how to use Screencastify, the
Hmm.
software to be able to make a screen recording. So it's been, I think, for the right kind of person. I think it's a really exciting learning experience.
I bet, and those skills, excuse me, I really feel like are, transferable to everything, especially now with remote teaching and distance learning. Those skills to be able to handle a camera and know how to record your screen and all that, everyone benefits from it, not only the teacher, but the students.
That's exactly right, and certainly, yeah, things like the lighting is just, I think, so important for remote learning.
Right, right. And can you think of any of the most memorable moments in the history of Teachers Connect, like even with the open mic or the grab and grow, anything that really kind of sticks out and super special?
Wow, yeah, there's so many. That's a great question, and There are so many that jump to my mind. Let's see. We had a teacher a couple years ago at one point who came on. I'm trying to remember. She said the mother of one of my students just got picked up by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Uh-huh.
What do I do? And there was, first of all, it was an incredibly, it's a powerful question,
Right.
because, the event she was talking about is obviously devastating to that family, regardless of where you lie in the political spectrum. It's devastating to that family. And this was, by the way, was a teacher of a kindergartner. So the mother of her student got picked up by ICE, and she didn't know what to do, and she came on the Teachersconnect and just got incredible everything from just validation, support, empathy, to really actionable steps for her to make sure to take in this really, really challenging situation. So I would say that was memorable.
Wow.
Uh, one of the presentations, there were many memorable presentations in the open mic sessions. One of them in particular, this was the one in particular really stood out. It was a duo. We had a couple duos in the open mic sessions, and in fact, the duos we had were in-service teachers with their pre-service, their student teachers or their interns.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this one duo from the Bronx. They were teaching. I think they said it's the poorest zip code in the country. So these are kids
Wow.
that are really struggling. And this was a veteran teacher of history, high school history, and his student teacher, who was I think a college senior. And what they presented was in New York City in the public schools, they were using Google Classrooms, and Google Classrooms is definitely better on a laptop or a desktop.
Mm-hmm.
But what they figured out, they were getting initially like 25% attendance rates in their classes, and they started looking at the analytics, the Google Analytics when kids were logging into the Google Classrooms and how long they were staying and what kinds of devices they were using.
Mm-hmm.
And what they realized was that most kids were logging in on a mobile device, and oftentimes it was in the evening, or even, these were high school kids, even late into the night.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really powerful information. And they called up a couple of the kids and asked a few questions, why late at night, why mobile devices, and found out, late at night is when it's quiet. I don't have a laptop to log in with. And they took all that information and moved off of Google Classrooms onto Google Sites, which is just a website, but it's a responsive website so that it works quite well on a mobile device, because most of the kids actually had a smartphone and were able to, and they had Wi-Fi, and they were able to use their phones to access the Google Sites. And they started posting things and also running some live classes in the evening and at night. And initially, I don't know where they are now, but initially they saw their attendance rates jump from 25% to 75%, just because
Wow.
they looked at that analytics data and made some adjustments. And yeah, so that I'd say is another really memorable experience, learning experience. That was from the open mic sessions.
Wow, that's great, and I love the fact that they met their audience where they were. instead of sticking it out with Google Classroom and trying to find a way to get everybody, laptops or desktops or whatever, they made the shift to Google Sites to be able to meet their audience where they were and fill that need. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure there was a learning curve to all that, but look at the benefits from 25 to 75%. Is that right?
Yes. At that point, that was what they were seeing.
That's huge.
Oh, yes, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And those stories of success like that, I think a lot of times as teachers, we feel overwhelmed with too much data and what do we do and so many options and this and that. And it's almost like, pick one thing or, whatever works and
Yeah.
then go from there and monitor and adjust. It's that same principle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It was simple and elegant and brilliant. And
That's wonderful.
as were, so many of the presentations.
Wow. And is the grab and grow and open mic open to anyone, or how if, for example, if one of our listeners wants to participate or learn from them, how would they go about that?
So the open mic sessions are over for the time being. We did our last one on, we actually did the last two were about teacher self-care. We did those in July. Those are all online. You can find them all in the Teachersconnect community, and you can access them all for free at teachersconnect.com. The grab and grow courses, you can preview all of them for free. That's at grabandgrow.teachersconnect.com. So all of the courses, you can get a preview and a rundown for free. There's one course that is fantastic. That is the teacher requested, the course instructor, her name is Joy Kerr. She requested that her course be available for free for anybody. And by the way, Joy is a middle school teacher in the Chicago area who has written a book called Shift This. She's a classroom teacher who's a national leader on shifting to student-centered learning. She's done a lot on Genius Hour, passion projects. Her course is amazing. It's about an activity called heartbreak mapping, and that entire course is free. And again, you can get that at grabandgrow.teachersconnect.com. And all the other courses are up there. And right now, they're all because this is, again, we're about 2 weeks into this. They're all being offered. They're all on sale at $9.75 right now, and they're all somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes long.
Great. Well, we'll make sure to link to those websites in the show notes for our listeners. That way they can access those easily. And that's great information. That just sounds like it's, the perfect storm for just helping teachers in so many different ways, and I just think that's a beautiful thing you folks are doing.
Oh, thank you. And, really the brilliance and the beauty is in these classroom teachers who are, taking additional time to create these videos, share something powerful. Our role is really just to make sure their work gets seen and heard, and so that really every teacher can become that vision of themselves they had when they went into teaching. They want to be that memorable teacher. And our work is just, it's in our name, is connecting these incredible classroom teachers who are taking a lead, taking a risk, sharing something they've learned. We want to be able to connect them with other classroom teachers throughout the world. We just published our first course. Two teachers from Argentina who they did a great course on approaches to work with young ELL students, pre-K to grade 2, basically, to make sure the remote learning is engaging and fun. And it's a great course.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Before we wrap up, Dave, is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience, or where they can reach you, or any last comments?
I just want to say thank you to you, Charlie, and your team. You are also doing incredibly important work at encouraging teachers to follow hunches, follow dreams, follow crazy ideas. So thank you for that. And absolutely, if people are interested, you can reach me at Dave, D-A-V-E, at teachersconnect.com. And I'm really happy to talk about Teachers Connect or Grab and Grow, or if you've got questions about, an idea you have, if I can be helpful, I will try and be helpful.
Great. We really do appreciate that, Dave, and giving away your personal email. And I'll make sure to link to that as well in the show notes so everybody can have access to it. And thank you for your kind words. I feel like all of us are doing what we can. And at the end of the day, it's a beautiful effort, through groups and synergy. And it's just a beautiful thing, helping teachers grow and therefore helping, students grow, and just schools in general and education as a whole. I think can benefit from, like you've said, through your experience with so many awesome projects, just growing and helping others, and then others helping you. And it's just a beautiful result.
Yes, it is. It's really powerful to, you kind of, in the abstract, I've always known that there are incredible things happening in little corners of classrooms all over the country, all over the world, and being able to make that abstract become more concrete is yes, very powerful and important.
Definitely. Well, we want to thank you again, Dave, for making time in your super busy schedule to squeeze us in there. And I'm sure our listeners are going to find tons of value here. And I'll make sure to link to everything we mentioned here in the episode in the show notes. Thank you again, Dave. Please keep changing the world. You guys are doing amazing things.
You do the same, Charlie. You and your team, please continue doing the same. And I'll look forward to the next conversation. We know, I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I know that classroom teachers are working incredibly hard and incredibly resourcefully, and are feeling racked with guilt that you're not able to right now reach your students in the way that you expect to reach them and hope to reach them. And we see you doing that work. We see you making that effort. You are making a difference. And despite, what you are often hearing in your communities and on the media, we got you. And keep going, because like always, we need you.
Definitely. Very well said, Dave. And I saw a video, if I could just squeeze this in, I saw a video on social media. I wish I could remember the links. It was a video of a teacher, and she said, I'm reaching out to all these parents, students, just making sure they have everything they need, supplies, materials, curriculum. She said, I got an email from one of my kids. He was high school, I think. And he said, you're taking care of all of us, but who's checking in on you and taking care of you?
Wow.
And she started crying. She said, it took someone to say that, because so many times, we're giving and giving and giving and giving. And she was like, it just took one kid to even just ask, how are you, miss? And so I think that compassion for people in our profession. And you're still very much, even though you're not in the classroom anymore, Dave, you're still very much a teacher at heart. I mean, it's palpable, your passion and your dedication to the profession and education as a whole. You're still leading that charge and fighting the good fight. So we appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Thank you, sir.
Same to you.
Thank you again for tuning in, folks. That's it for this episode. And I'll make sure to put all the info, all the links, everything in the show notes. We appreciate you, teachers. Keep doing what you do, changing the world. And goodbye for now. Thank you again for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, share, and consider leaving a review. It really does help. We make resources for teachers by teachers. Check us out at shiningscholareducation.com and at our Teachers Pay Teachers store as well. We'd love to hear from you, so email us at shiningscholareducation@gmail.com to share any questions or topics you'd like on the show. Thank you for all you do, teachers, and keep changing the world.